Oh, yes, get that out of the way. That infernal microphone. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Let me shed some more light on my subject. Welcome today, Tuesday. It is March 23rd, year 2021. I am Professor Hamamoto, and I'll be giving a talk on the great Grace Kelly. And in doing so, I mean her and her legacy and any surviving family members or friend, no disrespect. But as I state in the introduction, what I'm attempting here is to understand the larger constellation of sex power relationships within and among the ruling elite, the people that pretend to control our lives, right? Or at least hope to. And I see Grace Kelly as a individual through which these relationships, these sex power relationships, are refracted, not reflected, but refracted. There are certain segments of it that relate to our mundane lives. Okay. I'm also, as you've figured out by now, I'm interested in the begats and the begots and the mechanics and the specifics, but I'm really interested in the meta question. That is the ultimate, the above question. And that is the question of why, not just who, what, where, and when, but why. I'm interested in explanation. And for that purpose, I have to range into psychology, metaphysics, I look at the occult, I look at esoterica, because I want to know, I want to understand, and I don't know if I will ever reach this point unless I become omniscient, which is unlikely. There's only one omniscient being. If it's not even being, it's a meta being. It's God, right? I'll never have that level of omniscience, but I will strive to try to understand and explain human motivation and behavior for our own self-protection, for our own evolution to higher planes of behavior. That's really, I thought I should take a minute or two to explain what my motivation is. It's not sensationalism, although the topics are sensational. I'll grant you that. And it's not for clickbait. I mean, because in researching this course, this morning, I looked on YouTube to see all the material on Grace Kelly, and there's a ton of it. So I'm telling you at the outset, do not try to understand myself or Grace Kelly or what I am offering here, the topic, the subject of the Solar Temple, Grace Kelly, her film career, Hollywood super. If you think you know it all, then watch the other YouTubes, because you don't. And my approach is always counterintuitive. When even amongst professionals who do this type of work, when the herd is going in one direction, my tendency, it's not a tendency, it's etched in stone. It's my want. It's my default. I'm always going the other direction. That's what I'm trying to say. If a herd's going this way, yeah, it's done. It's been done, or they're just repeating themselves. I'm always assuming there's something out in this direction that no one's really picked up on. So that's me, and I encourage you to adopt, or at least partially adopt, that mindset. It doesn't win you any friends, and people they'll blame you of being a contrarian or someone who's obstinate or making up stuff. But you know what? That's people who are making unique discoveries are always going to be ostracized. So that goes with the territory. If you're sensitive about that, then don't do this type of work, and don't even watch this, because you're going to find some mind-blowing information that I'll present. Speaking of contrarians and paradigm busters, model busters, I got this the other day, and I'll talk with George tomorrow, Wednesday, where I make an appearance on, it's called now the BlackBerry RS. That's the name of the new channel, George Webb. BlackBerry RS, all aboard the Blackstone Express. That's tomorrow. If you want to talk, call in tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. One of the producers will put the number up there, and we'll devote as much time as we can to questions relating to, well, many of you don't have his book yet. I recommend it. But any of the previous work here. And I'll give my take on it. George has all the nuts and bolts and all the machinery and all the hardware down pat, and all the genealogies and the social network. He can't be beat on that. I mean, he literally wrote the book on it, or the books on it. But I'll be chiming in on what I've discovered on my own. And just to give you a preview, I'm going to be talking about not just the Kennedy assassination, John F. Kennedy, that is. There's been more than one Kennedy, male Kennedy. There was a female Kennedy that was killed not too long ago around the Mr. Allen area, right? But of the male Kennedy line, I'm talking about JF Kennedy. I want to introduce a couple of other people who were assassinated in the wake of the Kennedy assassination. One of them is UN, United Nations Secretary General, or Secretary, not General, United Nations Secretary Dag Hammarskjöld. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. He's Swedish by nationality, and he was killed in a airplane accident. So while you may think that focusing on JFK has been overdone, that nothing is going to be yielded. If you look in the larger context historically, even my discussion of who killed Stieg Larsson deals with NATO, right? NATO is a Cold War creation. This is what John F. Kennedy, our martyred president, was trying to follow a different course, a different trajectory in the post-war period that was antithetical to NATO and its handlers. These people that George is writing about, these people whose networks is still very much in place in 2021. So that's the type of insight that I hope to bring in tomorrow. But call up tomorrow and ask a question or say hello. Thank you very much. We'll see you on Wednesday then. But hang on. The title is called today of today's talk is Royal Sacrifice. And I spoke of royals a week or two ago, right? Meghan and Harry. Royals in the air. Royal jelly. Royal Sacrifice, Grace Kelly and celebrity sex cults. All right, most of you know about sex cults, but don't tune out. You know about Epstein, it's been done to death. You know about Harvey Weinstein. Everybody knows that there's something called sex cults, and everybody knows that Hollywood is involved with it. Right? I mean, just the everyday people understand. Everybody knows that DC is part of it. Again, I don't care about what everybody knows. I want to get at the meta question. Why? How come? Motivations. All right. So hopefully we'll try to unpack some of those explanations. And again, this is tentative. This is a work in progress. You are seeing how one writer operates, how he thinks, what type of material he goes through, what type of connection he makes, and puts out the hypotheses. And I'm really enjoying this format. I never had this opportunity in all my years as a writer, as a researcher. In the academic world, it was a very solitary occupation. I every once in a while would look out the window and see people playing in the park. But otherwise, my work was done in almost complete isolation. Every once in a while, I'll give a talk or give a paper, a conference appearance, and talk about my work, just a bit of it, right? Because you don't want to give away too much. This is something that my most recent book, I never shared with my colleagues. And it got to the point where they thought, oh, this book, this imaginary book he's talking about, it's never going to happen. It's like Bigfoot. It's like Sasquatch. It's a legend. But I didn't give it to them because I didn't want to tip my hand. I didn't want them to obstruct my research. And I didn't want them to plagiarize, because I'm one of the most plagiarized persons in my particular area of media studies. And yes, I was part of critical race studies, I have to say, too. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. And for example, if I'm interested in Bigfoot or Sasquatch, do you think I would bring that into the seminar room with my peers? No, I wouldn't. They don't, and not because I'm frightened of the repercussions or scared about it, what they're going to think about them. I could give a flying you know what about what people care about me. I just don't want them to steal my insights. This particular book, before I go into Grace Kelly in a moment, right? This particular book by Professor Bernard Heuvelmans, the father of cryptozoology, as we talked about last week, cryptozoology, which I am presenting as a critical race studies killer. We're going to put them out of business. All the pimps on race, ethnicity, and gender. We're going to put you out of business. We're going to replace it with the true study of humanity, and we'll call it cryptozoology. Anyway, and I got the book. Thank you very much, patrons. You allowed me to buy this. It's not cheap. It was like $34, $35. But it was well worth it. Thank you very much for supporting me so I could look at it. And I'll talk about it later. But just very briefly, Bernard Heuvelmans' work intersects with what we've been doing here, talking about rat lines, intelligence agencies, the international drug trade, right? Doug Valentine and people like that. Because Bernard Heuvelmans, is saying, how did Bigfoot, this particular one, Iceman, he calls it, how did he even get to the U.S. where he and another investigator could measure it, explore it, and take measurements and do the science behind it, because he believes that this is truly encrypted. This is for real, right? And interesting enough, there's a whole chapter dedicated to the Opium Triangle, right? Burma, Laos, Vietnam, where the CIA, in cooperation, now we know through military, probably Air Force, as well as any number of agencies, right? They were working hand in hand to transship tons of narcotics, opium, heroin into the United States to send them primarily to the inner city to underdevelop it, to extract wealth from there, and also to create helplessness amongst the population, typically minority populations, more specifically typical African American, right? That's known. That's everybody understands. There's so many movies that have been done about that, but I won't be embarrassed talking about it, because guess what? Bernard Heuvelmans says that's how they brought Bigfoot in, through the same rat line. Just as they were sowing opium in the bodies of dead GIs who were being returned to the U.S. for burial, they were able to sneak on. This is his hypothesis. You can't. And this is why the guy who came in possession of Bigfoot was very secretive about the origins and where it came from. He thinks it came in through one of these C-130s or whatever aircraft it was. Anyway, I'm still reading it. I'm studying more about cryptozoology. I don't intend to become an expert on cryptozoology, but I think it's important to this larger workup I'm doing on New World Order theory. So that's the progress report, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, patrons, again, for allowing me to bring that connection together. If I have any time, I'll on Thursday Trio, I'll talk to John O'Loughlin and George Webb about how their research, how their work and readings and writing intersects with Bigfoot. Who would have known? All right. Early life of Grace Patricia Kelly. Born 1929. She's of my father's generation, a few years younger. Died 1982. I think she was in the early 50s. You know, it's for the younger people watching that. She was an old lady. For older people who's watching, she was in the prime of her life. All right. For me, I'll never see 50 again. As she was taken away, and a lot of you know what happened. There's a road. I think it's a 2-lane road, not a highway, up to the palace, her home up in Monaco. And something went wrong with the vehicle, or I don't know the specifics. One of her daughters was with her. She suffered an injury, but Princess, by then, Princess Grace Kelly, Princess Grace, didn't survive the automobile accident. This is in 1982, quite a long time ago, which has repercussions to 2021, which I'll talk about in a moment, especially from what we know now about, for example, Jimmy Savile and the BBC scandal and Rochdale and the whole underground, the sex underground, and the Clinton Foundation. And now we have tons of children being exfiltrated across the U.S.-Mexico border. Who knows what fate awaits them here on the other side in El Norte, right? So this story is very much with us. And if we ask the right questions, if we look at the seemingly the romance of Grace Kelly, again, refracted through that romantic person, right, that individual, that construction, Grace Kelly, we can begin to understand some of the really base, just downright evil, ordinary doings of our power elite, of those people who are enforcing their regime of cruelty and torture and abuse and humiliation upon you and me, ladies and gentlemen. So she was Grace Kelly, the second daughter of a swashbuckling, I think he was a second generation Irish American, self-made man. I believe his neighbors and his friends and family called him Jack Kelly. And he was an athletic, handsome man. I mean, his Grace Kelly's genetics, I mean, you couldn't ask for better, right? And I think because I read a couple books, maybe 3, 4, 5 books on Grace Kelly. I probably, as a heterosexual male, I probably read more books on Grace Kelly or celebrities in general than most of your average sexual men. Most of these books are read by, this is demographic proof, by the way. This is not just my homophobia or sexism speaking, but most of these books are read either by women, number one, because men read books about how to hammer nails and build structures in the wilderness and how to, fix cars or something mechanical. Women and gay men, like celebrity gossip. And I love it too. I don't know. My dream is always to be, Harvey Levin and have a show like TMZ. And sit around and dish with everybody and gossip. Hey, well, what did you find? Yeah, I mean, but you know what? That's a very efficient way. It's kind of very charrettish, isn't it? The way TMZ functions to generate new knowledge. So there's always something to be learned out there. Harvey Levin, we love you, but I'm going to eat your lunch. I'm taking over. I'm coming through. So she was the second daughter of Jack Kelly, a construction man. I think he was in bricks and he was in Philadelphia. And self-made men and self-made women, they're connected in some fashion to City Hall. And you know what goes on in City Hall, right? You got the local power elite. And I'm sure he got all kinds of lucrative contracts to build hospitals, schools, government buildings and whatnot. But hey, that's the way life works. I don't have anything against low-level criminality. I draw the line, however, when you try to kill us. That is not criminality at that point. That's us being criminal, and it goes into evil, and evil must be stomped out. Criminals, we need them. I'm sorry, you might be a Pollyanna type person, but criminals make the world, they make life, they feed us. We're not going to get any food unless we have people running certain low-level crimes. But what is this other? I won't even call them mafia. That's really denigrating the mafia. But this elite that runs the medical and insurance establishment, they're way in the evil category, and this brings a certain urgency to this talk today, I believe. So she had a high-achieving brother. He was also a championship rower. I think both father and son were Olympic participants. They went to wherever they were held. And by the way, the Olympics weren't such a big deal back then. Not the big hype, big PC fest that they become. And I hope the Olympics eventually go back where they came from, which is Hitler's Germany. Of course, that Adolf Hitler designed the 5 continents, right? The Olympic rings, right? Joining the New World Order into 5. Yeah, you know that. And she had a prettier older sister. And the reason I mention that because she was kind of thrown in to Hollywood because she felt she wasn't smart enough and pretty enough to compete with her sister. In fact, she was refused. I guess Jack Kelly didn't donate enough money to Vassar, but Grace Kelly was not admitted to one of the better girls' schools where her older sister was. So her dad said, "Yeah, well, older sister, we like her, and she's got a lot of prospects. She's going to marry well, and you're the younger sister, so yeah, go ahead, go to New York and do some modeling." And they were a little bit protective. We're talking about late 40s and 50s. Single women didn't do that back then, right? It's just wasn't. So it's kind of advanced thinking on the part of her parents' side, but on the other hand, they might not have really cared that much because all their emotional capital was devoted to the older sister of Grace Kelly, who was supposed to be the superstar of the family. So that allowed Grace Kelly freedom. So if you out there are listening feel sorry about being like the last child or being neglected, to use that for your advantage. That means that no one's looking and no one really cares. I mean, you can really explore what you want to do. That's the way I look at it. I have an older sister, and she was on the professional track. She had to do it, and so I said, "Wow, good for her." Oh, anyway, so she spent Grace Kelly a number of years in New York City, and guess what she did a lot of time? And this is from the biographies I read, and I know the biographies like to deal with the sensational and the salacious, but she had a lot of hot sex. And again, this is not something that single women did back then, until Kinsey came along and supposedly revealed the truth, right, about how people in the suburbs were really, suburbs were having all kinds of kinky sex. That was, Alfred Kinsey with his grad students up at the University of Indiana. But in general, America was not like that. And she was sort of like a nature girl and felt very comfortable with her body and comfortable with her sexuality. And this goes against the grain of everything that we supposedly have read about in post 60s. 60s was supposed to be the breakthrough time where everybody got in touch with their bodies and their sexuality and their feelings and all that. But that's partially happy. I think people from time immemorial it's just a matter of how much you want to publicize it and put it out there and write about it and trumpet it around town. Yeah, I mean, I'm really having lots of hot sex here. It's just people had a greater sense of worth and pride and circumspection back in her day. I'm saying when she was come up as a young woman, 40s and early 50s. And even if they were doing it, they didn't broadcast. Today, you got to go up in front of millions of people in the Super Bowl and shake your butt in front of everybody. And they call that sexuality, right? I think that's a joke. Man, I'm not even on a moral level. It's just so trite and so obvious. And speaking of obvious, that's why Alfred Hitchcock, as a director, liked Grace Kelly, because she, on the outside, looked like she was very controlled and contained, but he could see that within her was a volcano ready to erupt, right? And he used her for 3 movies. It's pretty unusual. I mean, and I've read some bios about Alfred Hitchcock, and he was kind of, I don't think love is the right word, but because he never made any moves on her, never went out with her, like a lot of directors and actresses, or actors for that matter. But he just kind of was intrigued by her icy veneer and the giant volcano that was waiting to erupt, right? So he had her number, and he must have had some intelligence, or probably more not of intelligence. He probably was around by that time. He had moved to Hollywood. He's a British director, and Hollywood came calling and said, "Hey, we need you over here because we want some British propaganda to dovetail with the American propaganda. We want Anglo-American propaganda to push forward through the Cold War period. And Alfred Hitchcock, you are our man. And that goes to a question I'll ask later. Who was Alfred Hitchcock? Was he an intelligence asset? Anyway, Grace Kelly was in 3 of his movies, and they were all good ones. I mean, they stand the test of time. And I'm sorry if you don't like old movies. If you don't like, old, and you want to listen to cardiac arrest or what, the woman who shakes her butt, right? Then, be my guest. But check out Dial M for Murder, 1954. I mean, I'm only slightly younger than that movie, Dial M for Murder. Ray Milland. And by the way, they became lovers. One of her patterns was she always fell for these older men. So people have all these Freudian or pseudo-Freudian interpretations for that. Typically, though, older men are the ones in power, so it shouldn't be that. You don't really have to go into any depth psychology to figure that one out. But they were lovers for many years, and he was married, of course. She was a single woman, and it was an open secret in Hollywood. Of course, the civilians didn't know anything about it because there was no Harvey Levin back. There was no TMZ. There was no internet, and society was a lot more circumspect. There was a lot of nastiness going on there, from what I'm finding out. And then another movie in the same year. Wow, Hitchcock was really prolific. Rear Window, James Stewart. He played the movie entire. I think he was in a wheelchair the whole movie, which is a feat in itself. And his younger wife, again, is played by our friend Grace Kelly. And there's subtext. There's he's impotent, right? He's in a wheelchair, and he's like a voyeur. He's seeing this supposed murder through his rear window, looking through the binoculars, right? And then this another classic, To Catch a Thief, 1955, starring Cary Grant, who, by the way, also was gay, right? We talked about Rock Hudson. We talked about the whole underground, and again, it was an open secret. American society was a lot more open than you or I would ever imagine. There's a whole mythology again that the 60s ruined because I hear that, oh, it wasn't for the 60s and all the free sex and the free love and the drugs and the Beatles, American society would be so much better. What a BS historiography that is. It's not true. I mean, we need to reevaluate and take a good look at the 30s and 40s. In fact, as I've been telling you, I've been obsessed with Joan Crawford, especially her pre-code movies of the 30s, until the Hayes office got in and started censoring this stuff. That stuff was nasty. Oh, and this is Hollywood. This is supposed to be when your great grandmother, supposedly Victorian society would, they would put a little, drape around the piano leg. They wouldn't call it a leg. It would be called a limb. That's part of the mythology that came out in the 1960s, right? That we still believe. It's BS. The Victorian England in America was a highly sex-charged society. Can you imagine? All the marriageable age women coming from the countryside into the city anonymously to go to work from the offices in the factory with nothing to do at night, with the similar men from the countryside coming into these growing cities of Berlin, New York, Chicago, Tokyo, you name it, Shanghai. My gosh, they were getting it on. Great-great-grandmother, great-grandmother, grandmother, your mother. Yeah, your mother had sex. And once you can visualize that, then you're a true adult. And if you're repulsed by that very thought that your parents had sex, then you haven't matured yet. You can't really see life objectively. Anyway, that's an aside. Yeah, Cary Grant was also a pioneer in LSD experimentation. Yeah, it wasn't just them hippies like Jerry Rubin, and all these guys at Stanford, and John F. Kennedy supposedly turned on too. Mary Pinchot Meyer turned him on, and they smoked dope. So your grandparents, our ancestors, were a lot more cool than we give them credit for. Okay, so let's. God, I'm already 30 minutes into this. I haven't really get into the juicy stuff yet. Let's go. I broke it down into 3 or 4 parts. The first part was her early life. Second part is her Hitchcock years, right? And I don't know for sure. This is for further research. I think Hitchcock was an intelligence agency. I think he homed in on Grace Kelly specifically, and that it hypothesis on my part will have greater meaning as I conclude this talk here. I think that's one of the reasons why she was killed. Yeah, I know earlier I said she died in an automobile accident, but you and I know we're sophisticated adults and we know that off-time accidents are not accidental. Uh, so third part, Monaco, right? And I think it was, sue me if I'm wrong, I think it was Somerset Maugham, the novelist, who described Monaco as the sunny place for shady people. Wow, I love that phrase. I use it whenever I'm at a beach place, such as in La Jolla. And yeah, sunny places that look nice are for shady people. Who else can afford to be in places like that? I saw nothing but yachts and really nice watercraft when it was down La Jolla, down at the beach, and I go, wow, man, it must be great being on the inside of the New World Order, like working for SAIC or, being like Hunter Biden and all those people. But then I think, wow, look at Prince Philip. He looks like a mummy. He's barely alive. That's where everybody's going to wind up anyway. So enjoy your ill-gotten wealth, Hunter Biden and whoever else, because I really don't care. Just don't stop killing people. I'm not you, but play with your money and look at your balance in your bank account and be happy with that. Don't try to kill us. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci is. Don't you think retirement is owed you now? Is about time to kind of sail off and enjoy all of the millions of dollars that you raked in by just screwing over people and just taking duper's delight at making people sick and ill. Yeah, why don't you just move on? Henry Kissinger, PFC, Heinz Kissinger, what the hell's up with you, man? Something's wrong with you. Gosh, I hope there's some kind of post-mortem autopsy on you to see if there is really a beating heart in your chest. Right. Maybe they'll peel back the mask and it'll be some creature with a red face and horns, and they'll pull down your pants and find a tail there with a barb on the end. Maybe they'll take your shoes off and see cloven hooves. That's what I expect to see. Anyway, so and I'm leading up to the satanic part of this talk by previewing to you some of the creatures out there who wear, as it's called, the mask of sanity. These are mass killers, but they look perfectly sane. They look perfectly professional, but they're psycho killers. So she was groomed to play this princess role. Yeah, I know that's a trivial insight, but they went to such extremes is that she was giving a full rundown. They wanted to find out if she was a virgin. That's why I told you about the early part of her life. No way was she going to pass the virginity test. And so they had to game that. I can't remember how they fixed it, right? You can get a fake passport. You can pretend that you're an American citizen and get elected to the president of the United States, or you could be from Canada and you can be vice president of the United States, like Camel Toes Harris. Or President Harris, as Joe asterisk Biden likes to refer to her, right? So she passed the virginity test. I think there was some intervention by the Vatican, right? And they slid her in there. By the way, there was an awful, when was this? I think this is 2014, not that long ago. There was a terrible movie starring Nicole Kidman. It's 2014. It's Grace of Monaco. I saw it. It was a piece of garbage. well produced, a lot of money in there. I'm sure there was tons of money, drug money and human trafficking money that found its way up on the screen. They got to pay the top talent with all the money and still, wash it to a great extent and put it in the Swiss bank accounts. But I'm happy to report that when the film was screened at Cannes, the film festival, it was roundly booed. Yes, Nicole. And I think I'll spend a whole talk on Nicole Kidman. And I'm not going to utter one word about Tom Cruise. I'm going to talk about Nicole Kidman's father, Dr. Nicole Kidman. He's a psychotherapist who turned up dead as all this investigation was going on in Australia about national, international child trafficking rings, right? So I think the fact that she was put up there as a star in Grace of Monaco in 2014, it's a double message for us here. And that's, we can decode it at some other time. But I'm just mentioning that Grace Kelly is that important that she had a biopic made of her life. And by the way, there's a priest throughout the whole film who kind of hovers over her, guides Grace Kelly figure played by Nicole Kidman throughout the entire movie. And again, that serves the purpose of showing how your priest is really nice. He's a good guy. He's in this matters of the spirit. Even someone who's richer than 99% of humanity, like the Princess of Monaco, deserves help from the church. And so Frank Langella, I think it was, played that role. And he was a very sympathetic character. So the films have all this multiple purposes, right? Make us feel good about the Vatican, about Grace Kelly, and also to get us away from the larger conspiracy that underlie her death. By the way, I ran into, literally, Frank Langella years ago down in Sonoma County. I was at some kind of retreat, some sort of corporate retreat. That's why I know about cults and brainwashing and EST and neurolinguistic programming, because I had been through corporate training and I got some of that at the university. And you're getting it too if you work for any large institution. You work for government, schools, whatever, you are part of a cult, and they are indoctrinating you with these retreats, with these get-togethers. They're even working on you when you're at these mixers. And I mention this is because when we talk about cults and the occult, why are we stopping? Why are we drawing the boundary at Princess Grace and her supposed involvement with the solar temple? I think it's disturbing to us, or we're curious about it, because we might be seeing a refraction of ourselves through Grace Kelly if we work for the U.S. government, right? I mean, you saw the executive order issued by President Donald Trump saying we're going to stop doing critical race studies and training of government officials or government workers. And of course they never did stop, and they're probably intensified it now that Joe asterisk Biden is now in office as vice president, with President Camel Toes Harris calling the shots. So that's an example of how a public institution is involved with this training, inculcation. You can call it mind control. Yeah, go ahead. So let's not stop at Grace Kelly. So she played the role nicely. She passed the virginity test, and it was a loveless marriage, of course. Again, this time it was for real. She got involved with an older man. She managed to have 3 or 4 children, all wonderful. They all seem to have come out okay. Who knows? They're probably involved in kinky stuff too, but who cares? They're not creating hybrid species or strange vaccines that are meant to sterilize, that I know of. Maybe they have people doing it on their behalf, but so I'm not going to really go in on Princess Caroline or Princess Stephanie or Prince Albert or whoever. Why am I calling them princess? Why am I calling them prince? They're not my princess. They're not my prince. I have no stake. I have no skin in that game. They have skin in my game, though, and that's why I'm talking about it. Okay, let's talk about the Order of the Solar Temple. This is where it gets interesting. October 1994, 53 members of the Order of Solar Temple committed suicide almost simultaneously, or they were murdered. There's a question about that. And this took place not just in one place, like in Jonestown. Remember when I talked about Jonestown a couple of weeks ago, or months ago, I guess, by now, right? But it took place in Switzerland, but also Quebec, Canada. But it was all part of this larger group, this organization, this religious organization called the Order of Solar Temple, right? And there's a great academic book edited by a guy named James R. Lewis, and the title of the book is The Order of the Solar Temple, subtitled The Temple of Death, published Burlington, Vermont, Ashgate, 2006. And I won't read it through here, but I was going to give you some more details here, but there's so much on YouTube, there's so much online. You go ahead and read it if you want to find some of the gruesome details about this. Again, what am I interested in? I'm interested in the meta question. Why? Why are these people involved to the point where they would either kill themselves or put themselves in a position to be murdered, to be sacrificed by these cult leaders, right? Luc Jouret and what was his name? Albert de Mombro were the two people who were involved. And by the way, around the same time, there was a guy named Marc Deutro in Belgium who was finally apprehended after having imprisoned and enslaved and tortured and sexually abused any number of girls, right? Remember we were talking about that guy up in the Bay Area, right? The strange revelation about the case, the Deutro case, and this comes from Deutro himself, so you have to consider the source, right? But he claims that he was just simply the procurer for a larger network of people who were involved in pedophilia and sex abuse of these captive girls, and that created a huge scandal. It seems to have died down now to the point where now we're in a more of a global scandal or form of abduction and abuse of not just girls, but of the entire population, men, women, and children, under the current regime, especially in the U.S. and Canada and the Five Eyes countries, because the other countries seem to be loosening up now. They've been let off the tether that the World Health Organization and NATO has tied around most of us here. And again, why are we outraged by Marc Deutro or the Solar Temple, and we're not outraged by our captivity, our enslavement, our being abused, our being tortured, and our being perhaps murdered and killed, not immediately, but somewhere down the road? So my question, I have a list of questions that I have for further research. And in asking these questions, I'll also explain some other findings of mine. All the books and all the articles, including this one by Professor James Lewis, none of these books even allude to the possibility that government, military, and or corporate intelligence agencies are behind these cults, like the Solar Temple, right? Like Nixium. It's always everything but government, military, and corporate intelligence. So let's just use that as the default. Let's use that as a working assumption that when you hear about EST, or if you hear about Nixium, or you hear about the cult city in San Francisco, or you hear about Jonestown, or you hear about La Santa Muerte, let's just assume that there's some sort of government, corporate, and or military, and they're all the same, aren't they? I should just conflate them. We can just assume that there's involvement at either the creation of these cults or the maintenance of them, the control of them, all the way down the line, right? And those of you who are watching this show know from your own history you're understanding, you're reading that this is the part of the MO of security agencies, not just the CIA, and the CIA usually gets the brunt of it, but the Office of Naval Intelligence, where Steve Bannon comes from, by the way, or 30 other alphabet agencies in the U.S. that are supposedly civilian, not to mention corporate intelligence. We haven't talked about, there's corporations that have vast military operations. Howard Hughes had a huge surveillance and a intelligence operation. Of course, it intersected with FBI and CIA, but the corporate intelligence might even be bigger than all of these combined. And they're fused, so it's really hard to disentangle them. Okay, I'll restate the question I had earlier. Who was Alfred Hitchcock? Did he have an intelligent connection with British intelligence? I suspect he did, because the people who lionize him, justly so, he's an incredible filmmaker, such as the British Film Institute, who I spoke of previously in other talks, right? He was their god, right? He was the guy that put British film on the international map after a long absence due to the war, especially in the post-war period. It was Alfred Hitchcock. I wonder if he was ever knighted. I'm sure he was. I'm pretty sure he was, even though he spent the latter part of his career primarily in the U.S., shoring up the Anglo-American, quote-unquote, special relationship, as it's called. So did he have a direct connection with British intelligence? Was he controlled? Was he working with special intelligence? Was he working with the Tavistock, right? You read, yeah, the Beatles were the product of the Tavistock Institute, on and on and on and on. All right. But why just the Beatles? Why not? Is Alfred Hitchcock because he was like a portly, ungainly, enigmatic figure who looked like he was drooling while speaking? Is that why you don't want to talk about Alfred Hitchcock? Was much more important so far as controlling people in movies, as I'll talk about in a moment. Let me skirt through this real quick. Criminality and principality, right? I'm interested in zones, autonomous zones, districts, offshore. Well, Monaco is a classic case. It's a principality sandwiched between larger nation states. And that's where a lot of this type of gun running and trafficking and drugs and all that, that's principalities are a good place for, again, the sunny place for shady people. Okay, moving on. And this is, again, very much consistent with my other research, complementary research, was Grace Kelly a victim of intra-familial sex abuse that is within the family? Was her hard-charging father, I'm not saying, well, I'm just, it's something that needs to be looked at by future biographers, or maybe her brother, cause whoever it is, that's intra within the family. Or was she a victim of interfamilial sex abuse, right? That's a possibility. You might say that what might be considered hypersexuality might be tied to that, because that's part of what I'm reading in the literature of childhood sex abuse, is that these children, when they grow up, that's all they know, and that's how that's the norm for them, especially in expressing love or affection, appreciation. It's always through sex, and primarily, some form of sexual obsession, let's say. Was she a victim of incest? We don't know, but you look for that in the literature. These are just kind of background working hypotheses that a lot of the literature, most of it, doesn't really talk about. And I can't remember her first name, but her name's Freund. She's the one that came up with the concept of betrayal trauma. I'm rereading that book, and I'm liking it much better the second time through. I'll admit, I was kind of dismissive about the whole notion of betrayal trauma when I first heard. I said, okay, here's another trauma. How many do we need to fill up the DSM 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever edition they're on? So I approached it with skepticism, but I'm reading the material and I'm looking at the background research that she's done, Professor Freund. And I would think I was skeptical primarily because she's over at Stanford now. And whenever I hear that connection, I'm always on guard. But anyway, we have to take in consideration the stories and the claims of many people who victims of what she calls betrayal trauma. And she herself says at the front of the book was a victim of betrayal trauma that she had suppressed for many, many years. But ironically, she had made it her profession, right? So anyway, that's another story, which we'll return to at another point, no doubt. Okay, here's where Tavistock and cognitive psychology and my interest in neuroscience complements this work here. But I was rereading, and that's why I need these books, because I put them down and I go back to them. I have to riff through them very quickly. But I was rereading this book, Cult City, subtitled Jim Jones, Harvey Milk, and 10 Days That Shook San Francisco. Excellent book. And it talks about this woman, Sarah Jane Moore. She was one of the people that tried to kill Ronald Reagan, president. No, I think it was Gerald Ford. I'm correct. One of the presidents. And it talks about her whole obsession with films. And you might say, and this is not an original insight, you might say that she was programmed and triggered by motion pictures. We know this happens with Catcher in the Rye. We saw this in The Manchurian Candidate, where the flipping of the cards, the Queen of Spades, I guess it was, or Hearts maybe, triggered Lawrence Raymond's desires to go under mind control of his mother, who, by the way, he had an incestuous relationship with, right? There you go, the incest theme, betrayal trauma, once again. So Sarah Moore is a good example of this the flicker rate, which I grew up with watching television. My mother always warned me not to sit too close to television and don't watch so much of it because it's harmful to your brain. And she was right. Look what happened to me. I'm a victim. Who do I sue? But the people who are looking at social media now and they're Blackstones, right? They're black mirrors. They're also being inculcated. It's going right to their amygdala from what I'm seeing in the research. Someone's trying to call me right now, but I'm with you and I won't answer the phone. So let me coin a new analytical concept. Someone might have already come with it. I was too busy trying to research to see if it's been taken already, but I'm going to offer it to you here and you can check it out. But I'm going to call it the Alice effect. And I'm not going to give away everything. You figure out where I got the word Alice, the term Alice. But I call it the Alice effect, a new analytical concept. And this Alice effect affects women in movies, especially actresses that turn out to have an incredibly tempestuous history where it comes to marriage or courtship or male-female or male-male or same-sex relation, any type of intimate relationship. These people are just all over the place. And again, I attribute it to not just the content of films that they grew up with, but also the inculcation of it through the mechanics, cognitively, in the cognitive sense of their brains, right? That's where the neuroscience comes in. In addition to the corporate spying and surveillance, because the movie studios were very good at watching and surveilling and manipulating and controlling their property. People like Joan Crawford, they had them under contract. They were under contract to the studios. And that later was challenged in court. And they said, no, they didn't use the term, but it was a form of involuntary servitude or slavery. So they busted up studio system for that purpose. And then they came up with a new system that's even more controlling than the studio system. Yeah, that's how it works, right? Yeah, save us. Oh, it becomes worse, right? That's just the way they like to work it. So who are some examples of what I call the Alice effect? Number one, the person I've been studying, her movies a lot of them are out of print now, so I have to order them. Joan Crawford, man, what a history. I think she's married. And this is no knock on people who've been married multiple times, but I think getting married 5 times is probably it's time to say, no, I don't think I'm going to do it again. But not just the number of times she's been married, but she wound up as a board member of the head cheese, the big cheese of PepsiCo, the Pepsi-Cola, and PepsiCo is an intelligence front. These alphabet agencies have been integrated with corporate power for a long time. It's not just recently that we found, oh yeah, AstraZeneca, all these companies are intelligence. No, no, it's been going on for a while. And they start with innocuous foods like Coke and Pepsi and Frito-Lay and all the other the whole. That's why we're hurting people, because we're eating synthetic foods that are owned by intelligence agencies who want you dead, and me too. And they're with the World Horror Organization and NATO. So is it any secret that we're in such incredible straits? So Joan Crawford, another person who's I would say is, and you come up with your own list, is can be categorized as part of the Alice effect. That would be Elizabeth Taylor. You look at her history. And again, I've read all the bios. I've read more celebrity bios than any straight male has ever done, I'm sure. Grace Kelly, we've already talked about. Sharon Tate, more getting towards our time. And for the people a little younger than us, millennials, you've got your own Lindsay Lohan. And I'm sure you've got more people that I don't even know about. And then there's more people in the pipeline. That's just the girls. And then the boys, the male side, I have a different effect that I'll talk about later because I'm running out of time. And let me tell you, the Alice effect, yeah, it goes to Alice Littell. It goes back to the pen name he used was Lewis Carroll, the professor at Cambridge, or maybe it was Oxford, I can't remember, mathematics, who had this pedophilic fascination with little girls and on and on. Anyway, we could use that as kind of a shorthand, I think, as well as an analytical concept. We can work that out. We can't do it in 1 hour. That requires that could be a whole career for you. The Alice effect, a book, a theoretical reconceptualization, that could be you. You do it. I'm just out here throwing out ideas that need to be could be followed up on. Okay, I already talked about this, alluded to, and again, I'll probably spend more of an in-depth session on him alone. Werner Erhard. He was a used car salesman, not exaggerating, for real. He was a used car salesman, Werner Erhard. And those guys have really good insight into what makes people tick. So I'm not laughing at them. I want to know their secrets. Not that I could use them. I just don't want to get swindled on a car. Always take someone with you when you're going automobile shopping. That's my hint to you. EST is his operation. And I read here, see, okay, you may say, well, I'm not going to be in a cult. I have nothing to worry about. That's someone else's problem. Why even bother me with this? I'm strong-willed. I've never could succumb to this type of obvious manipulation. But let me read you very quickly a section. Ever since Est's early years, Erhard devoted special attention to exposing children to his mind control techniques. He encouraged teachers to enroll themselves in EST trainings and claimed by 1975 that nearly 9% of all educators in the San Francisco school district were EST graduates. Stocked with enthusiastic Erhard followers, the district offered merit credits used by teachers to earn salary increases for a special EST course offered through the extension program of the University of California at Santa Cruz, right? Isn't what the Santa Cruz, the murder capital, where all them serial killers was being produced? Maybe there's some connection there with EST and Werner. I don't know. But the point is that this type of indoctrination, this occultic, whether it's Solar Temple at the more sensational part, or EST, or your own corporate training, your own school training, is pervasive, right? It's all over the place. And whether you think you're, let's say, vulnerable to this or not, is really irrelevant, because if it's not you, it's everybody around you, around us. And this, ladies and gentlemen, helps explain how this giant, I want to call it's more than a psyops. This is like qualitatively something new. There's a global mind fug, F-U-G-G. I won't use the F word. There's a global mind fug has been almost entirely successful, right? So, sneer all you like at the Solar Temple and Grace Kelly and EST and whatever it is, or the Essel Institution, and say, oh yeah, I know all about the Tavistock Institute and the Beatles. I'm not going to fall. I'm too good for that. Think, or Nixium. Think again, ladies and gentlemen, you and me, I include myself on this. Man, I was part of a large, I'm still part of a large institution, right? But I'm on guard, and I'm going to provide, like cryptozoology, antidote to critical race study. I'm about solutions. So I'm working on I'm working through this so that I can provide a solution to developing our own selves, where we won't have to rely or fall victim to these various approaches meant to enslave us or keep us in a continual permanent state of mental and physical and financial enslavement, however you want to define it, in other words. And I'll end with our friend, and I mean that ironically because he's a creep, Keith Raniere of the Nixium cult. He called himself the Supreme, or gave himself some kind of title, right? A lot of hot sex, not really hot sex, just enslaved sex. Let's call it that. For him, it was a dream come true. But he had a phrase for the type of person that he wanted in his ideal society, where he was the king of it, and he used a Latin. It was called Dominus Obsequious Sororum. It was a gathering, a all-female society of obsequious women that he could dominate. It was like the 50 Shades of Grey, which, by the way, Keith Raniere took some of that and installed some of that psychology that he saw. And that book is heavily intelligence laden. I shouldn't have to tell you. You know that without me going there. But he used parts of those books in order to say, hey, how can I tweak my Nixium system to work on that psychology there? So that's where we are, ladies and gentlemen, as we go into the second year of total lockdown, right? We're just being taken down into the basement and manacled and put in a little closet. We hear the turn of the key, and these people keep upping it. They say, no, you're gonna wear this mask for life. You're the gimp, man. You're wearing the ball gag for the rest of your life, and we own you, right? It's Marc Dutroux writ large. Anyway, I apologize for ending on such a dark note. But the happy news is that we're going to break all this down. We're as ugly as it all is. We're going to figure out ways, whether it's to bust out the penny whistle, the fiddle, or the guitar, and make music. We're going to dance, cook ourselves a batch of cookies from scratch, whatever it is. We're going to go to church. We'll read the Bible, the five prophets of what we call the Old Testament and the New, right? The Gospels. Whatever it is, or we'll read fiction and make our own music and turn our back on synthetic diversions that we have out there, and not get entranced by the flicker rate of this continual signal that's being sent out there to sync with and entrain our neurological systems. So we're going to do that. It can be done. You're all very sane right here. And I'm grateful for that. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'll see you tomorrow morning on the Belt Road Show, right? RS. Call in. We'll see you tomorrow. And I'll see you on Thursday with an all-new Professor Hamamoto talk. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you later. Bye. Thank you, ECAT. Bye.